Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. I'm really happy today to be joined by Chris Kuntz. He is the VP of Strategic Ops at Augmentir. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Jim. Thank you. I've followed your show for quite some time, so it's a pleasure finally getting on here and being here and getting a chance to speak with you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and of course, we've got the background of you contributing your excellent perspectives on the recent Forbes article about workforce development. So obviously a hot topic, but you guys have some really cool stuff going at Augmentir. Before we get into that, why don't you just tell the audience about who you are and how you got doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I head up marketing and operations here at Augmentir, and I've been an entrepreneur for years. Originally, I started my career, wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and as I was getting through college, I realized that's not what I want to do. And so I was fortunate enough, I got my degree in mechanical engineering, but I was also fortunate enough, and this was in the early 90s, to also get my degree in computer science, and things sort of took off from there. So I've been part of several successful technology startups, primarily in manufacturing and technology in the manufacturing sector, and have been part of a great team where we've essentially keep getting back together again and building pioneering technologies targeting some of the biggest issues in manufacturing, and that's kind of where we are here today at Augmentir.
Well, it's interesting. I am a mechanical engineer as well. I've spent my whole career in manufacturing, and I can definitely sing the praises of guys like you who have made my job through all those decades that much easier. Thank you. Now let's dig into Augmentir. So tell us about, what you were looking at with that and how it's gone since you got the ball rolling.
Yeah, sure. So the founders of Augmentir, we've had a pretty deep history in bringing innovative software into manufacturing, dating back to before I was even, in the professional working world. So technologies like Wonderware, Lighthammer, which is now part of SAP, MII, and ThingWorks were all technologies founded and built by the founders of Augmentir. And when we were building out ThingWorks, industrial IoT platform acquired by PTC in 2014, they've done fantastic things with it since then. When we were transitioning out of PTC ThingWorks, we were looking at the manufacturing landscape and trying to understand what the biggest needs were at the time, what the biggest gaps were. And after talking to a lot of manufacturers, we quickly realized it was the workforce problems or the workforce challenges that were front and top and center, front of mind. And
Yep.
the reality was, of all the technologies and automation and AI that's been built in manufacturing over the years, there's been little technology designed and purpose built for the human in the factories. And we've reached the end of we've optimized with automation and robotics, and there's not a whole lot more you can optimize there. I mean, you can certainly do more, but as far as the work processes on the front line, humans are still involved. They will still be there.
Yep.
There are just certain frontline processes where humans are in the loop, and they will always be in the loop, or at least for the foreseeable future. Yet they're using technology, if you want to even call it that they were using 20 years ago, paper,
Right.
clipboards, and very disconnected from the business. And so we set out at Augmentir to address that. We realized right up front that it was a data problem more than anything else, much in the same way with ThingWorks and connected machines. Once you connect a machine, you get a lot of data, and you can understand a lot about how that machine is operating, how that machine is working, where it's doing well, where it's not doing well, and optimizing it. We can do the same with humans now, once they are digitally connected. And so we set out, we built an AI platform, and it's been fantastic. And obviously the workforce situation has just become increasingly more important as the years have gone on over the past 5, 6, 7 years. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I talk to, a dozen people a week in the industry in all segments and all over the world. And I don't think I have a single conversation anymore that doesn't in some way involve the workforce challenge. So
right.
you guys picked a good one. The other interesting thing is I've said it again and again on here. Obviously, with 37 years in manufacturing, I'm a huge believer in factory automation and what we've done on the floor
Right.
to automate things. But I also say again and again, especially for the small guys, your best opportunity may not have anything to do with that kind of automation. It may be the work process automation. So
That's
again,
exactly, yeah.
great selection. And what is it that led you to that specifically?
So when you think about that, you hit the point straight on. There are so many opportunities for optimization in manufacturing, but oftentimes, whether you're a continuous improvement lead or whether you're just a production supervisor, you don't know what those are. And the worker-centric processes oftentimes hold the biggest, the last mile of production efficiency that you can squeeze out of a manufacturing operation today.
Yep.
But it's relatively unknown on what that is. Is it targeted training to a cohort of workers? Is it individual specific training? Is it a work process that needs to be optimized? You don't know that unless you have data around that, unless you're capturing information around that. And that's one of the first things that we did. We said, so if we have now a connected workforce and technology that can enable that, we can now stack rank work processes and then surface those insights and to continuous improvements teams to say, this is the area that's going to give you the biggest opportunity for improvement. This is the biggest area is going to give you training improvement. This is how effective your training is or how ineffective your training is. And so you can start to compare that and you can start to really optimize work processing. And it could be in content, it could be in the process itself, or it could be in targeted training, upskilling, reskilling opportunities. There's a wealth of answers when it comes down to it, but the data is what was challenging before. And now we're able to surface that for companies.
Yeah, and I find that angle fascinating. I've covered a number of companies that offer worker-centric solutions for the factory floor, but I think you're the first one who talked about the data involving the people and the strength and power that can bring to an organization for improvement. Now your, I guess, entity, as you put out there with Augmentir, is called Augie. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so with Augmentir, we've been an AI platform from day one. So we're capturing a lot of data on workers, work processes, inefficiencies, their efficiencies, and underlying that, we have a lot of proprietary algorithms that can help measure and optimize those work processes and content processes. Augie was a natural evolution of that. When you looked at, this is now 2 years ago, you looked at the advent of generative AI solutions. We felt that a technology like Augie, in a very built for manufacturing, purpose-built environment, so you're not using ChatGPT to help find answers on how to do a lockout tagout on a piece of equipment. You're actually doing something in a very controlled, constrained environment, a very secure, private environment. We felt that was a perfect application. And so we launched Augie a year and a half ago, strictly on work assistance. So the initial application for it was, you think about the scenario, workers on the shop floor today, they have 5 to 10 times less experience than workers did 5 to 10 years ago.
Yep.
There's a labor shortage out there, so people are hiring less skilled workers and hoping to put the burden on training and put the burden on on the job support and everything like that. And so having a generative AI assistant that can be sitting alongside a worker and helping them by answering questions, troubleshooting, it's that digital subject matter expert looking over your shoulder. We rolled that out a year and a half ago, and it was used immediately by our manufacturing customers. As that evolved, we looked at, one of the things we hear oftentimes with manufacturing companies when they're starting their digitization journey is not just about the change management associated with putting wearable devices or tablets in the hands of workers that were previously using paper. It's about digitizing the tens of thousands of SOPs that had existed previously and doing it in a way where they're not just digital in a PDF form, but digital in an interactive form. Maybe it's an interactive checklist where you can add form validation and things like that. And every company said one of the biggest challenges in our digital transformation journey is that initial step of digitizing existing content. And what better solution to that than a generative AI solution? And so we've since evolved Augie to not just include the work assistants, but also be a content assistant. And so we have customers now wide range of use cases, taking existing videos and converting them into digital procedures, a video that a subject matter expert may have created on how to do a repair routine or how to do a lockout tagout, for example, and being able to convert that digitally into a digital work instruction or a training guide, doing language translation. So there's just a wealth of opportunity now that we've sort of built out this whole generative AI industrial suite on top of the core foundation that we have.
Interesting. Yeah. And you mentioned language translation, and I know that's an increasing challenge people face. How specifically does that work with Augie?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to think about when you think about, language translation. First of all, real-time language translation. So you have a worker who has their own preference on a language, their own native language. And then you're looking at a work assistant, a digital work assistant that may be helping them with answers to problems. The root of that information may exist in a corporate document that isn't in that worker's language. And so being able to take that, find the answer, and then convert that or translate that into the worker's preferred language in real time is a huge value add just right there. The second is in building and digitizing work procedures. So being able to build it in one language and then being able to quickly generate that in a variety of different source languages based on the geographies of your various plants or where that information is going. And so a couple different ways there where we're using it today, and it's really helping to accelerate adoption. It's helping to ensure that workers are getting the support that they need in a way that they can understand it, and in a way that they can, turn that into safer work, higher quality work, more efficient work.
Got it. Yep. Now, as you've rolled Augie out and had some experience with the challenges out there that it can help tackle, what would you say maybe like the top 2 or 3 things you're seeing out in the workplace that you're helping to resolve? What would those challenges be?
Yeah. So when you think about the experience gap, not just the skills gap, but the experience gap, it's that troubleshooting. It's that real-time troubleshooting. Hey, I'm running into an issue here. This is a standard routine. I'm doing a preventative maintenance on a machine, or I'm operating this line, standard operating, but I'm running into a problem. Where do I go for help? And obviously, subject matter experts are great, but if they're not available, how do you prevent the, significant downtime there? So having that digital subject matter expert Augie there to provide that real-time troubleshooting is a huge value add. We're also seeing companies use it for onboarding. And so when you think about, okay, we have to hire less skilled workers now because we can't find the skilled workers to hire, and that puts the burden from a HR and learning and development standpoint, it puts the burden on training. Mm-hmm. And so how do we condense that initial training time? Because most people, when they leave the classroom, they're going to forget 90% of what they learned anyway. And so how do you shorten that initial sort of classroom onboarding time to critical activities and then put training into the flow of work? And we're having companies take information, putting into 1-point lessons, putting into quizzes that are infused into work instructions or procedures that they're running to ensure that there's continuity there with training. And so it helps really accelerate onboarding time for our customers. We've seen companies accelerate onboarding with new hires down from 2-3 months down to 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. The other area, which is really two other areas which are really interesting. One is getting insights into the data that exists on the frontline operations. So now, for the first time with a connected workforce, we have massive amounts of data that we can capture. But not every company has a data scientist that can sit there and analyze the data, build it out into Power BI reports and things like that. And so how can you use, from a natural language standpoint, a digital assistant that can give you answers to where are my best procedures for optimization? From a capacity planning standpoint, if you think about skills, your skills matrix and your production schedule, when am I going to run into a skills gap this week, this month? And are there things that I can adjust from a hiring standpoint or from a cross-training standpoint now to prevent issues 2 or 3 weeks from now? And tools like Augie have access into that because they have access into production schedules, access into the skills inventory of your workforce. And they can help surface those insights in a way that are very understandable for folks that are looking ahead, not just reacting to problems in real time. So lot of fascinating applications there.
Yeah, definitely. Does Augie then learn each individual in a way?
Yeah. So
Or
when
the
you think
workforce goes?
about, so Augie has to have context into the work being done and who's asking the question. And
Mhm.
so very easy to sort of relate this to consumer AI and ChatGPT, which we've all used, or Gemini versus
Right.
a technology like Augie. With Augie, you have to know that worker, their skill level, their capability level. You have to know uh, what part of the organization they're in. You have to know what job they're working on, what their context of the work that they're performing, because that's going to matter in the response that you're giving it. And that's where it gets quite a bit different than, let's say, ChatGPT, right? It doesn't really care who you are in a way unless you're
Yeah.
telling it to care.
Right.
But
Right.
we have to enrich Augie's prompts with the context of the worker, their skill level. And when you think about things like verified and unverified data, it could be that you're looking to solve a problem. There's a filler jam, and there may be a collaboration between two other workers that solved that problem 2 weeks ago. Augie might return that, but if it's a novice worker that doesn't have the ability to assess whether that's a valid response or not, that may not be a valid return, versus if it's a subject matter expert who can validate that, Augie could return that. So Augie has to have context into who's asking the question, context into the job being performed, and what their skill levels are, which is very important in the context of, assistance in the industrial setting.
Yep. One thing I find interesting that I've never really heard before is you distinguishing between skill level and experience level. So talk a little more about that distinction.
Yeah, so I tend to think about it like, we all have driver's licenses for operating motor vehicles. So at some point in time, we took a driver's ed test, we passed it, and we're on the road driving. That skill level of passing that driver's exam really doesn't tell us anything about how we're performing on the job, or it doesn't tell us how we're actually driving today.
Right.
And it doesn't tell us how many times we've driven. So same rule applies in manufacturing. You're doing a PM on a machine. Have you been trained in that, and have you been endorsed on that skill? And how many times have you performed that job, and how well do you perform it versus benchmarks, versus a common benchmark that you may set as an organization? So all those factors play a role into who's the best individual to perform this job, and it may feed into a scheduling system. Or when we talked earlier about um, capacity planning, you
Yeah.
may decide that you want to put a less skilled or less experienced worker on a job because they're going to be shadowed by someone, and it may be the ability to give them additional exposure to that routine because you have the staff to do that, versus
Mhm.
there's maybe a scenario where you don't have the staff and you need to put that highly skilled worker on there. And it's also a great opportunity for targeted training. You may have someone
Yep.
that you always thought was an expert, but they're really inefficient in a certain routine, and maybe it's just that they need some targeted training in that area. So
Yeah, and the other thing that pops to my head is, we don't only have the skill and experience level challenge on the front line, we've also got it in the supervisory and management roles, and so what you're talking about is some level of automation around what those skilled factory managers would do in the past, juggling their different levels of talent, and now Augie's helping with that, so that's really
exactly.
interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of exciting use cases. We have, so integrations are big in our world, right? So when you think about the disconnected frontline operations, now we're connecting it for the first time. What do
Mhm.
you connect it to? You're connecting it to the business processes that run. You're connecting it to processes that run out of your ERP system, your MES system, your CMMS system, quality, safety. Um, all of those require technology to integrate those systems together. And oftentimes that gets complex. You're pulling in IT to help wire things together. That's another application for Augie and for generative AI, is making sense of those integrations, making sense of, we have a, low code, pro code environment where you can build out your own integrations in JavaScript. Augie
Mhm.
can now make sense of those, explain those, and even build out functions that may integrate with a learning management system or your ERP system if it's simple functions. And so from an extensibility standpoint, just a huge application there, where previously you would have to rely on IT or some sort of technology infrastructure that you may not have as a
Yep.
manufacturing company.
Yeah, really interesting. let's get into a little nuts and bolts. So help me understand, if I'm an operator on a machine out in the factory, give me a specific example of a task where Augie is going to work with me, and how would that happen?
Yeah. So one of the common use cases that we have in the manufacturing setting for line operators, for example, is autonomous maintenance. And so essentially that is putting the more routine maintenance tasks, the responsibility of the line operator to perform those tasks to keep the line up and running and to prevent downtime. So it could be a center lining procedure, it could be a lubrication, a cleaning procedure. And oftentimes when an operator is performing those, they have to go through a standard operating procedure. There's a lockout, tag out. I got to do the procedure. And so instead of those being on paper, they're in a digital format. It could be a wearable device. It could be a tablet. Oftentimes it's a mounted tablet on the line that the person is working on. Now imagine Augie as a digital assistant that's sort of sitting there, listening and making sure that things are running properly. So whether it's this particular step in the routine is taking too long, hey, here's a quick helper video that may help you, get past this if there's sort of a knowledge gap there. Mm-hmm. Or if the operator is actually running into an issue, Augie is right there. Hey, Augie, I'm running into an issue. I see error code 567 coming back from this machine. What does that mean? Hey, I found this troubleshooting guide. It talks about that scenario, and here's the steps to solve that problem. Great. Can you turn that into a procedure for me to run through? Here you go. Run through that procedure. So having Augie right there to help with those issues that happen all the time that lead to downtime, lead to, quality issues, potentially even safety issues, and being able to offset that in real time. So just, that's kind of a simple example of how someone might interface, with Augie on a regular basis. And when you think about production supervisors, shift managers, folks in like a leader standard work type of role, they may be using Augie to help analyze the data that they're collecting from their operation. Where are the levels of efficiency that I can gain here? Mm-hmm. And using that in a very natural language fashion.
Yeah. And another important point then is you're not just talking about basic operation. You're talking about facilitating continuous improvement methodologies that oftentimes fall by the wayside for the very reasons we've talked about: the lack of training, the lack of skill and tenure on the floor. Exactly. So that's really fascinating.
Yep.
Great selling point.
Yeah, no, it's been, adoption's been fantastic.
I bet.
Universally our customers are leveraging our AI and more of the companies are using Augie. It's interesting to our customers that are using it deeply to look at the analysis of how many repeat questions are getting asked of Augie. And, when that frequency goes down, that they're retaining that knowledge that they asked the question. So there's just some fascinating use cases that are happening that, we can sit back and just benefit from, the great examples of how companies are using this to drive their operations that were things that we just weren't even considering before, but giving them the tools to do that, it's just fascinating to see.
Do you get any pushback from operators thinking, oh my gosh, this machine is spying on me?
No, it's a common question, right? But, this big brother, or am I getting tracked? The reality, and no, so the answer is no, we don't, because when this technology gets into the hands of operators, there's a couple sides to that. One is it's helping them with their job, and so that in and of itself, they're embracing it. Workers have always been measured. This is just a more, a more worker-centric way of ensuring that they're doing work correctly. And it's helping the organization intervene when there may be an opportunity to do that. One of the great examples of this, so we have HR leaders leaning into this technology because they're seeing it as a way, our AI can detect signals on worker engagement. So a very trivial but simple but important example is you detect an oil spill on the factory floor. Do you flag it to a safety engineer or not? Right, that's a signal for an engaged worker. Giving feedback on a procedure. Hey, I'm doing this bearing cleaning procedure, and the picture on the work instruction doesn't look anything like what I'm seeing here. So here's a better picture to use for that, right? Those are very much signals of engaged workers that HR can use and say, okay, how do we reward that? How do we do a badging system? How do we reward that? Or if there's an opportunity to intervene when you see a trend of worker engagement going down, for example. And so I think this idea of worker empowerment or just building tools where workers have more control over their career path, they have more visibility and control over their progressions into how they're progressing in their career, where they need to take the next step. I think it's very worker centric, and we're seeing it embraced much more than the opposite. I mean, there's always going to be this level of change management when you're introducing new technology that's just going to happen. Mm-hmm. But the most successful companies are rolling this out with the workers in mind early on in the process, getting them involved, and it works in those scenarios for sure.
Yeah, and I think done right, it's just such a great story. I can't imagine they wouldn't embrace it.
Right.
Well, you guys have done some amazing things in a pretty darn short time, but obviously AI continues to just develop by leaps and bounds. What are you looking at maybe for like the next 2-3 years as the big opportunities for Augmentir?
Yeah, so it's interesting, the pace of development in AI, it's really hard to look at 2 or 3 years. Right now you're looking at 2 or 3 months, what are things going to look like 2 or 3 months from now? And so there's some exciting opportunities ahead for us. We see a lot. I mentioned, worker engagement levels and sort of the HR angle to this. That is a direction we're heading in, which is going to really open up a lot of doors for us in terms of the value across the organization there, because there's a lot of data that can be leveraged in that sense that's, maybe not being leveraged today. So that's a big area. When you think about Augie, and the blending of lines between generative AI and agentic AI, we're already seeing it with ChatGPT and the operator functionality that they've rolled out. So we're already seeing that blending of a line of having your industrial AI assistant, Augie in our case, acting a little autonomously in certain areas and implementing, autonomous routines or implementing functions. And so we're seeing those lines blur a little bit more, and companies asking us on the value of Augmentir as an agent and Augie as an agent. So we're seeing that. So that's certainly a direction that we see is pretty exciting for us. We're working with companies that have built out their own corporate knowledge graphs. So information on workforce capabilities, subject matter expert, like tacit knowledge that exists in the organization, production data, equipment data. And if we, Augie, can be both a source of data into that knowledge graph, that's huge. And so now you're talking about integrating those systems. And then also from like a graph RAG standpoint, being able to pull that information to a line operator that may benefit from having that information combined with the LLM that's underneath Augie there. And so enriching that data set. Yep. So from a bidirectional standpoint there, we're seeing this is really exciting. It's not just production frontline operations data, it's now corporate data, and the intersection of those knowledge graphs gives the operators or the frontline personnel a much richer data set to tap into. But then also we're acting as a source of data that never existed before that can support those corporate knowledge bases. So some exciting applications that are happening. Again, the pace is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're certainly excited about it, but it's moving fast.
One quick point. I'm really glad you mentioned tacit knowledge. I think a very unappreciated concept, and clearly I was even thinking as you talked about the distinction between the skill level and the experience level. These guys get it.
Yeah, there's so many great examples of tribal knowledge, just knowledge that exists there that hasn't been digitized. Now we have an opportunity to do that. But it's knowledge that you would never even know how to digitize before.
Right. Yeah. And the people who know it can't even put it into words.
Exactly. And so it's great from digitizing, that level of content. We've already seen results in that area. So pretty fascinating, but very important area of knowledge.
Definitely. Well, Chris, this has been absolutely fascinating. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
It's an exciting space. I think we're only scratching the surface on what we can do to help support the frontline workforce and frontline operations in general. I think we're just in the beginning stages of this journey. It's not just connecting the previously disconnected frontline operations is taking advantage of the data. We're excited about where we're going. We're excited about what our customers are doing it, and looking forward to seeing what's ahead.
Yeah, me too. And you're absolutely right. It's clearly an exciting progression, and we don't even know,
Right.
like you kind of alluded to, we don't know where it's headed. So definitely keep me in mind as you guys continue to develop
for sure.
around new things that might fit with my Forbes coverage, or coming back on here and giving us an update on what you guys are up to.
Would love to do that. It's always a pleasure. Great.
Okay, Chris. Well, Chris Kuntz from Augmentir, thank you for being with us today. And as always, thanks to you in the audience. You guys are why we're here. And so many of you are in manufacturing. You had to just eat this up. This is some phenomenal stuff. I can't promise everyone's going to bring stuff as exciting and revolutionary as what Chris brought us today, but we're here every Tuesday, and everything we bring is at least a little exciting and revolutionary. So tune in. We'll be here. More shows coming. From Jim Vinosky, thank you so much. Manufacturing Talks, signing off.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.